Welcome back to the Relentless podcast. I'm so excited to have you guys with me here today. And in this podcast, I'm always trying to find practitioners or individuals that can help you on your physical, mental, and emotional journey towards wellness. Today's guest happens to fit both those criteria because we're going to talk about business and the personal training side of being a practitioner and how they help us be better, especially myself, as I rely on these people. And then individually as a woman, going through different seasons of life and how that's played out for her. So she's going to cover it all for us today. So Kim, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm super excited. Glad we get to connect and talk about things that people need to hear.
Absolutely. So before we get into all the good stuff, I'm going to tell everyone, because you're in Florida, correct?
Yes, correct.
What city?
In Tampa. Tampa, Florida.
So I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina. So you might think, how did these two ladies meet? And it was here in Matthews, North Carolina, in the Burn Bootcamp, Matthews location. So I have always had an internal philosophy of when I see someone stronger than me, to not be intimidated and not wish I was different in a way that they are stronger or better, but can I learn something from them to help me be better and grow? So we were in the gym one day doing our workout, and I think farmers carries were coming up next. And so I went to grab 245s and I was going to do my farmer carries, and I look over and I see Kim picked up 250s. So I'm like, all right, I might not be able to make it all the way around the gym, but I'm going to try. So she was my inspiration. And we're on a Zoom interview here right now, so you can't really see what our body types look like. But I'm a pretty tall chick. You've got like 3 inches on me, I think. So
yep, 6'1".
There you go, 6'1". So someone just seeing you walk down the road or in the store somewhere, their immediate assumption is that you're an athlete. You played or are playing for someone somewhere. And I get the same thing because I've been working at this for a long time, but it's because of a lot of work. It didn't come natural to me or my family. So at that time that we met in the gym, I was just turning 40. So I was on this journey and on this just push to get as healthy as I could, because I have a specific health history I have to deal with. Going into my 40s, that was what my path was on. That was my desire and my push at that time. And I could see that you were on some type of journey as well. So being with you in the gym every day and watching you push and watching you struggle and seeing your body change over the couple years that we've known each other until you moved to Florida, I can see the progress. So I don't even know where I want to start with all of this because there's so much good stuff to get into, but maybe just start from right there. At that time in Matthews, what was going on in your life? Because you went from a member to now a head trainer.
Yes. So I do have to say that fitness, and so I did play sports growing up. Being this tall since I was 12, it wasn't an option in my household. It was like, you're going to get out there and do something. Piano lessons isn't going to cut it. Like, go outside. And so I did get plugged in with basketball at an early age. And there are a lot of factors that I think, as I look back now, that had to do with my relationship with physical activity and fitness, sports, however you want to look at it. It all ties together, especially when you're younger. Growing up, I was never in the top. I was one of those players that had potential. Mm-hmm. I was the potential player with a lot of heart. And so my relationship with sports really didn't begin to take form until I was in high school on an AAU traveling team. And I think that that's relevant because when I developed the relationship with fitness that lasted, which is when I joined Burn, it wasn't about the physical part. Now, granted, I had health issues, not personally, but on both sides of my family, you know, once we get to the 30s, that's when things start to go left as far as our health. And I was close to 250 pounds when I started at Burn. And so that was my wake up call to it. But then I realized that this was being at Matthews was the emotional string that connected to the purpose that I had developed as an athlete, because I've always been like in that underdog category. Mm-hmm. And by the time I would say a sophomore in college, I was more grown into myself as a leader. I had developed, you know, some confidence that I didn't have my entire life. So when I came to Burn, it wasn't about trying to look a certain way. Like you said, similar. I always got the attention. That wasn't necessarily negative, you know, when I went anywhere. Mm-hmm. You know, so that didn't drive me for anything. And so when I went there, those workouts, it just became a kind of like a haven. And similar to what you said, just wanting to be strong and taking my own accountability and my own journey seriously, because I couldn't backslide from this one. You know, I didn't give myself that option when I bought that Groupon, honestly. You know, if I was going to commit to it after the 30 days, then there was no option for me. And right after I joined is when I got laid off. And I was feeling great, man. You know, the type of coaching that I got there, and the leadership and the mentorship, physically, the mental pushes, the accountability, it was all what I needed in my life at that time, because I went from being a stepmom to being this single 30-year-old woman that has never experienced life. I went straight from college to a 10-year relationship. So now here we are at 30, and you have this introvert already woman that like never really got to become herself. She just, you know, I was one of those ones, I'm super loyal. So like I was all about wanting to learn how to have my role in the relationship. There were 2 children involved that were his, and they were with us most of the time. So that was all, you know, I was playing the role, but you can't force certain things, you know.
That gives me such chill bumps, because that was a fork in the road. When that thing happened, you could have went one way or the other. And with what at being a body worker, I always say I deal with the physical expression of mental and emotional trauma. And what I see a lot, especially with women, is the loss of identity.
Yes.
Being the precursor to a downward slide into a lot of harmful things and hurtful things and lost time. Mm-hmm. So that's, you know, what I want to try to push people, because I know people listening are in situations like that. So it's in those moments when you have had that loss, you know, it doesn't matter how the loss happened or what the circumstances around the loss was, it's still a loss. And I think that's the point you're making, is at that moment, I think the crux of this is you reached out for someone for help.
I did. And to be honest with you, the details of this part, when I tell my story, I don't ever go into, but I know that it's relevant in this conversation today. You know, it was, I think all those years that I felt insecure growing up, I think prepared me for this. Because once I left this situation, which was toxic. And it was toxic not because of him and not because of me, just because over the course of 10 years of knowing somebody from 20 to 30, you're going to mature at different rates. And the separation had been there 2 or 3 years before. It just got to the moment to where I finally was able to just walk away. But I think all of those years of being a loner growing up as a kid prepared me.
I've got this. I've done it before.
Yeah. I'm like, okay, I don't know anything personally, but like the world's not going to know that I'm a train wreck right now. So like I can hold it together. And again, like it came from sports. When it came to my professional life, no one could outwork me. And I was always in middle management. So high stress, mediocre pay, typical corporate. And so being in property management, a month after I had made that commitment to with Burn Bootcamp, is when I got laid off. And I knew in my head that there's no way I can quit, and Burn, it's a little bit higher of an echelon than just your typical box gym or your Planet Fit.
Yes. Yeah.
So, when you look at the fact that, well, here I am now with no income, not sure if I want to stay in this industry, but I know I need to stay here. So that was my first, I would consider, adult decision, because I made the decision that I don't know how, but this has to stay, and I'm not going to quit this. And I was talking yesterday about this very topic. When you make a decision, and this is what I want people to know as I continue to develop in my mentorship, because that's the role that I have now as a head trainer. When you make a decision, you make that decision, it's going to happen. Like there's nothing that can stop it as long as you're alive. But what people fail to realize is that they think they're making a decision, but they're not. There's a difference between a priority, an obligation, and a commitment. Those are 3 different layers of a decision. So people do make a lot of things a priority, and they make the commitment with the intentions. But when it comes to the obligation part of it, the by any means necessary, that's when they normally let it, something deters them from it, because there's an unknown of how it's going to get done. Right. So
I'm going to try this diet out for a couple
right.
weeks.
Right. And some people,
and usually those couple weeks you didn't really even.
Right. And it starts with, people always try to start at the top, like, and so many metaphors sound redundant. But as I'm growing and I'm reading books and I'm listening to podcasts, they're all saying the same thing over and over. It's very simple.
Baby steps.
Baby steps. You can't build a house starting at the roof.
Yeah.
Like, put it down on paper, small non-negotiables. And it's like the simple things, but like there's so much noise going on everywhere that people miss. Yeah. Like the efficiency and the effectiveness of those tiny details. So
I see it every day. Every day in my practice, people say, I'm going to start, because coming to see me is like coming to see like a priest. I get the confessional. Like, I know I'm not doing this. I'm going to start doing this and this. I'm like, are you sleeping at night?
Mm-hmm.
That's where we need to start, because you can't heal if you're not sleeping.
Right.
Are you drinking water?
Exactly.
It's the easiest things that are the hardest to do. So when you were in that decision phase, I think that people often talk about having faith. I think that's what you're saying, is you put feet to your faith, and you knew what was best for your body and your mind at the time. And logically, you had no money coming in, but you were putting that faith in what you knew to be right for yourself, and you just kept moving forward.
Right. And, the funny thing about it is, after my lifestyle changed. So I was living up towards past Statesville, and then I moved back to Charlotte. And that year is when I put on all of the weight. And I was one of those people that I drank wine every day. I was your normal American. I worked 75 hours a week. I drank wine. I ordered out on the weekends. Like, I was your typical American.
And you're and a typical person going through a traumatic event.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And honestly, I had to, I don't want to say not face it. Everybody handles things differently. I've been very blessed that although I had a troubling childhood where I was socially awkward, I was raised in a home with both parents, and they made sure that I did well in school and stayed active. So a lot of the things, I choose to remember that from my childhood. The only reason that I even address the things that were like, the bullying, being an introvert and outcast, is because that ended up being my strength. If it was something that was still a weakness to me, obviously the conversation might be different, but I think it's relevant because there are people out there that grew up like that it still troubles them.
Well, and I often say we're always the little kid on the inside. We're always that little girl on the inside. That doesn't ever go away. That's our default setting. So I'm the same way. So I saw a cousin several years ago that only knew me in childhood, and we're talking and I'm being me, and they're like, who are you? I don't know who you are, because you were the quiet little girl in the corner your whole childhood. I'm like, yeah, there was a reason why.
Mm-hmm.
So,
exactly.
and throw me in a certain situation or with certain people, or if I have, a memory, my default setting is, but then I kick into what I know now, and I switch gears. So we're always that person on the inside. And it's a testament of the healing phase that you're in, that you can catch that quickly and not behave in that default setting. So I want to kind of go into that, because there are a lot of people walking around right now. I'm 43. Do you want to share how old you are?
I'll be 36 June 1st.
Okay. So you're 36. I'm 43. There are a lot of people walking around right now as a 43-year-old and as a 36-year-old that are living a life of a 10-year-old. And they're seeing the world through the lens of that 10-year-old hurt, neglected child. And that's why they're behaving the way they are. That's why they have the posture the way they do. That's what I'm looking for. What caused that posture that you have that's shrunken and little and hiding? So looking back into those days, you had to learn and grow from that. What were some of the things that caused you to be that awkward young child?
Being tall, very young.
Mm-hmm.
And you're tall, so you get it. Like, it's something we can kind of smirk about now, but when you're 5 and when you're 6 and you're a head taller than everybody else, you have to think of the developmental phase. It's funny, but think of a 5-year-old that is, taller than everybody else. I was clumsy, and and I have 4 older brothers, and my brothers were the coolest kids in school. So they were, 7 to 10 years older than me, but we were in the same district, small town. And so when you're you're the clumsy, awkward girl that you wish you could hide in a corner, but that there's a good chance if you walk across the lunchroom that you're going to slip on something, you're going to bump into something because you're nervous. Like, that was me until I got to 9th grade. Mm-hmm. So I don't want to discredit the fact that that happened to me. One story that I haven't shared it recently, but when I was 8 years old, I was out on the playground, and I fell off the monkey bars. I didn't fall off the monkey bars. I slipped and I like broke my pelvic bone on the monkey bars.
Wow.
And because I was that awkward little girl, the teachers, when I got picked on, the teachers were always too embarrassed to say anything. So when I fell, I had to walk to the bathroom by myself, which was in the building, because the teacher didn't want to leave the playground and everybody was just looking at me. Well, it turns out I was in the hospital for 2 weeks because I almost broke. I was like a hairline away from completely shattering my pelvic bone.
Wow.
But the traumatizing part about it for me was that on the flip side, it looked as if no one cared. But what it showed me is that in that situation, that was like a real situation, all of these kids were there. It was just bark. It was all bark and there was nothing behind it because everybody froze in a real situation. And that's the part where I started to it started to carry less weight with me about what people said. Right. And, especially coming back from the hospital or coming back to school, and then everybody was my friend. And I'm like, you've been like tripping me in the hallway for 5 years now and we're 11. Like, yeah. So, what I have to tell people is that sometimes my secret to doing all of this was serving, finding a way to serve somehow. Mm-hmm. You do it with your practice. Mm-hmm. Find a way to serve. It's not easy, but sometimes you have to stop looking in the mirror so much, and find something else positive that you can give back. That's how I truly healed over the years.
And so the people that are listening, because I tie in the mind and body all the time because you can't disconnect them. So what you had happen was you literally did have those people that are supposed to be your caregivers neglect you and neglect. Yep. And that type of behavior is one of the worst traumas to go through because that's supposed to be the person that's being your care provider, whether that be a parent or a teacher, some type of leadership or role model set in front of you and set in that position. When you are neglected by them, that is a trauma. Adding on to that, shame about your bodily functions, shame about something with your body, that can last a lifetime and have lifelong issues. And pelvic floor, my podcast for that will be coming out tomorrow. I just did a whole podcast on the pelvic floor. And when you have any trauma there, childbirth, falling, anything like that, that can last a lifetime and people don't talk about it. So you had an injury, you had an injury and you didn't have any help from the people that are caring for you. And then when you returned,
the teacher that did not leave the playground with me was my cousin's mother. So my second cousin. So this is like a friend of my mom. Her daughter was at all my birthday parties, even though she picks up me at school. Mm-hmm. And I did not tell my mom until I was 32 that the teacher didn't come.
So you're adding more. You're adding more to the pot here. Now you're adding secrecy. You're hiding things.
Because I knew it would break her heart.
Right. You're protecting. Yes, yeah. I know. But this is how we start building. So I talk a lot about making deposits into certain accounts. So you had neglect, you're putting that deposit in. You had a physical injury and you have body shame, that you feel shame over your body for something you had no control over. Another individual that's actually related to you neglected you. So all of these things, there's a reason that everyone is the way they are. So the equation that came together that made you that insecure, awkward social child was because of the people around you. So you said that occurrence was one thing that started making you look around like, why are you liking me now? So you started to kind of see people for who they were, it sounds like. So does that logical thought process come from someone you can look back on and kind of had a good example of that? Or was that just your thought process and experiencing these things that started to bring that to your mind?
So I'm so much like my dad. My mom was the one. She had older brothers, but she was the oldest sister. But she got picked on, and the times when she was at school was different, back then.
Mm-hmm.
And so she got picked on for multiple reasons, because of the color of her skin, because she was a girl. It was normal.
Mm-hmm.
And on the flip side of it, my dad was, cooler than the flip side of the pillow, just because of how he looked. Like, he was good looking and he was tall, so everybody liked him. But they both on the same side have taught me things, because neither one of them really had an interest of the social life that they were in. And so when it came to reading people, they both did it all of their lives. And I think that's something that carries on. And I think it is genetic, because my nieces and nephews are the same way.
But you have broken that generational habit and that blueprint that was written on you, because in my background as well, the women were the barefoot in the kitchen, pregnant, making food. That was their worth. That was all their worth. That was what you were supposed to do. You're supposed to be quiet.
Yeah.
And that's what gets repeated, and that's what you see as a young child. That's what you look at your ladies above you, and you start to replicate that behavior. But you started a journey that led you somewhere different. So you've broken, I think, what could be considered that generational curse that some people speak about.
I did, because my parents, like I said, they raised me well. They both retired. Like, they did a phenomenal job. But when I've always had this itch to where I felt like I didn't want to work in corporate. I was nuts. And this was something my dad and I disagreed on for years. Because I would work a job, I'd get promoted, and like really, really fast, and then a better job would come, and I'm like, let me go try this one. And, I was just never afraid, because I didn't know what I was looking for, but I knew there was something out there for me that was bigger. And actually, it wasn't until recently, even like leading up until this gym opened, it wasn't until recently that they realized that, wow, this girl really has a voice in this platform that she has. And now they're starting to appreciate it. So I do feel as though I broke the generational curse.
It took work. So we can't jump from that sophomore to where you are now. We still have to fill in the gaps of what was in between. So after high school, did you go to college?
I went to college. Yep. Totally different. Oh, it was so different for me. I went back to like Kim and Michelle. But it was easier for me to do that.
That default setting. Yep.
Yes. But being on the basketball team, not so much. And I did start my freshman year, which was not pretty for me with the seniors, because I took a seniors starting spot. Yeah. And
I know.
So then there's that. Like, it's like every time I tried, like I did not try. I never tried to get the attention that I got.
Yeah.
Even now, I'm just like, okay, like that's cool. I'm not trying to ruffle any feathers here, but I'm starting to own it now, whatever.
Exactly. That's one of the things. So again, I'm 43. I'm like old hat, but what I learned was I'm okay with whatever. So I'm comfortable in my skin. I stopped apologizing for being tall, being whatever. But I went through the same thing. So knowing as a freshman in college, knowing that I was going to walk into people already not liking me because of how I looked, I bought everybody a present and had it laying on their bed so that when they walked into the room, my roommates would see, I gave them a gift. I was like sacrificing something to the whatever. But I totally get that. And so it's like, I agree. It's like everything you walk up against, it's like a constant battle and a constant struggle. But at some point you have to say that battle's not mine. That struggle is not mine. Yep. I know my intentions and I know my heart. So how long did it last through college that you still kind of had that struggle? The
whole time.
Yeah.
The whole time. There were numerous random things throughout college. I was an art major. So basketball coach, art major, there was a clash right there. That's like two opposite sides of the brain.
Let's get into
So if
all
I
of
had to
it.
miss for a game, yeah, my art teachers were like, well, we don't care. You need to have this project done, you know. And so it's life. And that's what I just told my clients this today, because with everything going on right now, the emotional support and responsibility that I have to my clients right now is the highest that it's ever been.
Yeah.
I have to think about how to support them in ways that they don't expect me to.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is the part where I talk about serving, because I can sit there, I have more time to think about everything, 36, not married, no kids. What are we doing here? Okay, I'll buy a dog. Like, I can sit there and rack my brain for years to come. But like, there are people that I have a platform and a responsibility and an influence that I have to, I have to uphold, because I make that one of my non-negotiables, because I have the tools to do that. And so what I just told them yesterday is that, listen, life is good. People are constantly not going to like you. People are constantly going to remind you of something from your childhood. Like, that is how things are. So even going through college, like when I talk to my college coach now, she has so much remorse about certain things that happen still. And I'm like, Coach, it's been 15 years. We're good.
Yeah.
But she is so, so proud of me. She's one of my biggest mentors. But that's what I always tell people is things are going to happen that always remind you of what you're struggling with.
Mm-hmm.
It is and you know this, it's constant. You wouldn't start this podcast because if it was something that you can just not care about anymore and move on with your life, you would have no reason to have this podcast or your practice. Yeah. You doing that and serving in these ways, that is your way. That's your medicine to help you deal with the way that you grew up. You're serving, and that's the message to people.
That's a good way to put it. And one thing I always think about too is a lot of people think that we're just so strong, and we are. I mean, things don't affect us as much as they did when I was younger. I don't get knocked off my rails very easily, but the only way I got there was a bunch of little battles that I lost and a bunch of hurt. Mm-hmm. And with you have your eyes and ears on so many people. You can see things and hear things that they're not even aware of yet. So you are a precursor for them a lot of times, I believe, from going into something deeper than they could by saying, hey, yep, I've been there. And this is what can happen if you do this. And this is what can happen if you do this. So when someone looks at you and sees you and thinks she's so strong, she's got it together, nothing phases her. That didn't happen overnight. It took 36 years. It took a lot of practice, a lot of, situations that are uncomfortable, but you took little steps in each one that you overcame to build up those deposits of strength and tenacity and fortitude and that mental game of knowing, I know things are bad right now. There's no denying it, but I'm going to keep moving forward. And I'm going to keep doing the little things really, really well, because this too shall pass.
Yep.
So going from college, how soon after college did you get into this relationship? In college you met?
No, it was maybe 2 years after college.
Okay.
And I jumped 2 feet in. I was like, wait, you want to be in an exclusive relationship? Let's go. Like 2 months after I met him, moved in. 10 years,
So looking back with 2020, because 2020 is great when it happens, right? But giving advice to some single women or women out of college or women thinking about getting relationships, because that relationship is a precursor to what your future looks like. Looking back now, did you see any red flags to what you experienced throughout those 10 years that you could give people wisdom about?
Honestly, I could say yes. Like the easy answer would be yes. Even though it was only, 12 years ago, or let's see, 2006, whatever, 14 years ago. Times were different back then, and so when I look at my past and I talk about, especially the decisions that I made as an adult, obviously, like, it's like, yeah, I should have chose right instead of going left here. But I can't tell someone, because there are people out there like myself that have a sense of unfulfillment from leaving certain things incomplete, or they, the way that I was left hanging on that playground, it made it really, really hard and unsettling for me to walk away from people, which sometimes put me in situations that were not for my best interest, but my loyalty. And that's the part I had to work through. If I would have walked away on year 2 or year 3 or whatever the case may be, or did this instead of that, that would have been, I can't say how it would have been, but leaving things and people hanging in a way when they express that they need it, even if it's not a proper expression of need.
Right. Well, you're like totally explaining. We talked about a good friend of mine, Liz Burkholder, here in Charlotte. She does a lot with mental health and a lot of other things, but she's been a very good encouragement to me with some practical ways to look at life and look at situations. And one of the things that she shared with me was a victim triangle and like personalities that we get stuck in. And you're explaining exactly one of these specific victim mentality thought processes, because that's what we get stuck in, is a thought process. And our intention is really, really good. So it's like, in the beginning, like you said, someone is here, someone is loving me, someone is accepting me. What's wrong with this? Mm-hmm. And it's just understanding and being able to see down the road when that starts to go awry. But I'm sure you can see, like, so in this victim triangle, I'm just going to tell the people listening, so maybe they'll hear themselves in these stories, and you can tell more about like yourself as one of those examples, and then how you started to transition, because you're not this anymore.
No.
So the victim self has very loose boundaries, lets everyone in, can't stand up for themselves, passive, allows others to run over them, trusts everyone, unsure where I end and others begin, infringe on boundaries, afraid to speak up for myself, apologize too much. Does that sound familiar at all?
It sounds very familiar. And the biggest thing that I put on the back burner in those years, and several, I noticed it early in the relationship, is that I was too afraid to come out in the leader, I was so afraid to do that, because you have a man that has an ego, and, it starts with, okay, the height, but then, like I said, it doesn't matter what job I had. I always did well. I communicated well. I had good relationships and interactions with people in general. So those are things that became a threat very early in our relationship. So I kind of, just let him be the social butterfly. And I know a lot of women do that. I know a lot of people do that. And so that was one of the biggest things that was the crossroads that I was like, well, that's not going to work with me on this earth. Like, I can't be that person.
Yeah. If God gave you a personality that wants to come out and wants to shine, you have to find somebody that's compatible with that. And that's really important. One of the other parts of this, and I don't know if you experienced this one, but the persecutor self, maybe you transitioned in it, because this is usually one of the phases of healing, is you go from that not standing up for yourself at all to becoming the persecutor self, very rigid boundaries, lets no one in, aggressive, attacking when standing up for yourself, running over others, trust no one, never apologize. So they're always ready for a fight. Did you ever have that experience?
To an extent, yes. Especially you know, when things weren't reciprocated, that really bothered me.
Mm-hmm.
It took me a long time, especially when, you know, after I got out of that relationship with him, it took me a long time to accept. It really bothered me when people didn't give back, whether it was respect in the workplace, whether it was a friend that needed something, and then like, I'm not even asking you for anything, but you're not available. And then I realized that's when I really experienced how adults are, honestly, because the time that I was with him, I was like trying to build this family. You know, we had a circle of friends, and, you know, everything was really like, you know, dots
In
and
the right spots.
yeah, it was like we were all there, all the same people, didn't have to worry about like how the world really is. And so I really started to experience from a, you know, being alone from a solo standpoint, that's just how people are. It's what you can do for them in that moment. Generally speaking, that's the world we live in. And that was hard for me. That caused super walls, insecurities. And for the longest time, and I wanted to add this earlier when you were saying this, it's not that I'm no longer insecure. I'm still very insecure.
Yeah.
I just choose not to give my voice to certain things.
Mm-hmm.
My voice is I'm going to only speak and express things, and be vulnerable about things that I feel can help someone. Now, I do have my close friends and my family members that I can just vent to about whatever, but they also know on the flip side that they are that outlet.
Right.
But it's just, you have to choose what you give a voice to.
Which is an example of the empowered self.
Yes.
So
Yes.
you're doing exactly what I would hope to do, is you're showing people how you walk through those stages, and there's no other way to do it but to walk through those stages. Because
Yeah.
you can't just say, I'm going to be this person today.
No.
You have to earn it. But the empowered self, and this little outline has helped me so much in dealing with people, because given this outline now, I can kind of hear and see where other people are in this paradigm. So it helps me know how to respond to them. Because if I know they're stuck in the victim self or the persecutor self, there's another rescuer self that has no boundaries. But when I know they're in one of those, I'm like, oh, okay, this is kind of what I'm dealing with. This is how I need to respond to them. But what you're demonstrating is that you've come through those experiences, and the empowered self has healthy boundaries. Like you said, you choose where you put your words and where you share your words. Healthfully discerns who to trust and who to let in. They are assertive, that they're able to stand up for themselves and speak your truth without being rude or disrespectful. That's a huge one for me, because when I hear someone get nasty with like whatever it may be, I'm like, oh, they're stuck in that one.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so we can stand up for ourselves. Saying no is a huge part of self-care. But if we can't do it with kindness, number one, we can't ever lead anybody. We can't be an example for anybody. But we're also showing our cards that we're not really healed. So
Right.
you came through that situation, and you begin to discern, this situation is not helping me grow. This is actually pushing who I am down.
Yes.
So as that began to work its way out in your head, that while was wonderful to realize and come to those conclusions, at the same time was very scary, because now you're like, I've got decisions to make.
Yes.
So how did that process start to unfold? Because that didn't happen overnight either.
It was the day that everything ended was so calm. It was like the eye of a storm. There was no argument. You know, like I said, we had already kind of been like, you come in, he goes this way, I go that way. You know, I get the kid, you know, I get his daughter up, take her to, like, there was no engagement for quite a while leading up to that. That became our normal. But it was a statement. It wasn't an argument. It was something that had been said a few days earlier. And my parents live in Charlotte, and you know, their their opinion was pretty obvious. But they let me live my life, and the only thing they said is, if you come home, our door's always open. But it doesn't swing both ways. Like, if you make a decision, we're here, but just know that when you come, you're here. And I just went, I was up in the Hickory area, and he was out, and and I just left. It was a very punctuated moment. I would say it wasn't anything that was long and drawn out. There was no violent, it was none of that. It was just a crossroads. And we were engaged at that point. And so when I came home, I knew I had a lot to figure out, but I've always been really good about not making same mistakes over and over when it comes to like life stuff. I found 100,000 new mistakes to make, but I knew that I could not backtrack. I'm very much a 2 feet in person. So the transition was tough. Honestly, I'm not going to lie. Like, it's still happening. It wasn't until the opportunity here in Carrollwood opened up. There was a lot of uncertainties. That's what people need to understand. Like, it's not going to be a cause and effect journey.
A lot of people
you have to realize
they see the end result, and that's all they appreciate. They don't appreciate the process and the struggle. Another thing that
and the end result is never going to be. The end result's never going to be what you visualize in the beginning. It's never going to be that. There's no way for you to predict that.
Yeah. If you ever see a blueprint from the very first time it was drawn to the final product, it usually looks completely different. And the more adaptable we become, the easier and quicker those processes happen. It's when we become secluded and isolated and that victim of rigidity that we aren't able to grow and get the end result that we really want. So going back into that situation, I would hope everyone will go Google Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Is another great visual of how our mind and body work together. So what you're describing in that relationship is what so many people do, is they get stuck in a routine, and it works. And it's, like you said, there wasn't fighting, there wasn't anything, and it was doable and workable. And there are so many marriages like that, thousands, and they're just stuck in a routine, and it's fine. It works for everybody. The problem is that your body knows you're walking it into something every day that's not healthy for it. And Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a triangle that basically shows you what you need in your life and in your body to achieve the things that you want. So in the top of that triangle is like the important things like morality and accepting of facts, problem solving, the mental things, those things that we need to do to get the great things that we want. Under that is esteem, confidence, achievement, respect of others. Under that is family, belonging. Under that is security, employment, resources. The very bottom of the triangle is your basic biological needs. So when you're you start having this mindset set towards, I want to do these things. And so you're way up here in the triangle, but you don't have the support here in the family and the friends and the whatever to help you be that thing who you are. And your body knows it. So even though you're in a situation where it's workable, it's doable, your body starts to tell you, which is why we get sick and why we aren't able to lose weight and why our shoulder hurts constantly no matter what we do to it, because your body is sending out these hormonal effects of, I'm in a toxic relationship. So how did that transition work after you made the tough decision? Because it's a very hard decision to end something. And then you were drinking the wine every night and eating out on the weekends, and that paradigm, which is completely how these things usually work. Give yourself grace when you're in that season, if you're in that season right now. But then walk us through how you started getting those components filled in that bottom triangle so that you have the ability to use your mental capacity in the way that you wanted to end up where you are now?
I allowed myself to process what was happening. I knew that there were a lot of things that that I was going to have to figure out, that I didn't have the tools to figure out, and I accepted that. People put so much pressure on themselves in trying to find a solution and an answer without the tools, and they know they don't have the tools, but they let the pressure of society make them feel like they have to figure it out. Or they may have family or children or a boss. They may have people in their life that put this obligation on them. But I just allowed myself that year. I dove into work. Not the best decision. Like, I'm not advising anything. That was just my path. It was a very quiet moment when a reality check, when I realized that, number one, again, with my health issues, my parents fortunately have been healthy most of their lives, but my mom at that point in my life had lost 3 of her 8 siblings, when I was still a kid, and it was like in their early 40s, and it's like liver cancer, bone cancer, and then, and since then another uncle. So like and my dad's, my sister, had gout and she passed away at 50. And it's like, so I'm like, it was a very quiet voice though.
Yeah.
It was. And I needed the carpet to be pulled under me. I noticed that a lot of times we feel like we're falling down the Grand Canyon and our attention goes to the fact that we're falling, that you need to realize that, hey, maybe there's some things that you needed to hear this entire time about your well-being, about you. Because so many people out there are pouring from empty vessels.
Yeah. And that's why
that's a big thing.
Yeah, 100%. And I love that. I think the phrase, you can't give from an empty cup. Oh, yes, you can, because a lot of people are. A lot of people.
Yeah.
And that's why the small steps are so important, because when you look at, when you're in that situation, in that year that you were in, the greatest thing that we lose is time. The worst thing that could happen to you isn't failure. Failure is the best thing that could happen to you, because failure shows you how it doesn't work. So try a different way. But the worst thing you lose is time. So if that year would have stretched out to 5 years, you don't know where you might have been at that point. So when we look at things and are starting to want to make a change in our lives, like you said earlier, don't think I'm going to just snap my fingers, make a decision, turn around and have something else happen immediately. It's let's drink wine only on Saturdays and water the rest of the week. That could be your first step. Whatever the first step is, take a step, however small, because the quicker you take that smallest step, the quicker that year could have been 6 months, or even less, which I know you see with your clients every day, because and I have this exact same thing. And one year this happened like so profoundly. I had 2 clients that were almost the exact same body type, exact same age, number of children, C-section scar, back pain, like almost the exact same presentation. I gave them the same treatment. I gave them almost the same protocol to do at home. One took the information that I gave and just 100% effort as much as she could, because there was 4 kids in the house, but was trying in some capacity. The other one, I don't feel like doing that. I just want to come in for body work, and just excuse after excuse, and did little to nothing. And I saw them go in 2 totally different ways. And in fitness, which we haven't even gotten into yet, but in fitness and in personal training, I know you see the same thing. As you have these people come to you, and I tell everyone, it's like baking a cake. There's different flavors, different color you can throw in, but it's really the same equation every time. And it's the same with the mind and the body. And again, the worst thing you can lose is time. So you've got to see this in what you do every day with people. and you probably saw it in yourself now, which is a different way you handle things.
I do. And I think that the first step with the role that I have, I think I'm not a professional. You know, I didn't come into this industry as a professional. I didn't go to college for this. And I think that that's good, because what's the first thing they say when you get out of college? Oh, you have this degree, but you don't have experience. So I look at my role as a trainer, and I now realize that with me having this experience, it allowed me to show people that you got to find your power first. You got to be okay with looking in the mirror first, and that's where you start. Let's just start there. Don't think about anything else. And I think in how helping them do that organically, they have to find their own way. We can give them the blueprint, just like the blueprint that I used. It already existed. It wasn't anything new. So what I realized is that people, they have to find their own way. You know, like you said, you can give two of the same tools to the same people and it have a totally different effect. So what I found is that is accountability. So certain things they're not allowed to do in front of me. Like, for example, there was a client today on the Zoom video. I have two clients that work out behind me, and she was telling the person next to her, she was like, oh, I can never figure this out. She was like, I just suck at this. And like, she already knows, like, I've known her well enough. Like she knows I was like, you already know you're not allowed, like, straight face. Yeah. You know you're not allowed to talk like that in front of me. Yeah. Like, get the work, get the reps in. Like, you just wasted 15 seconds by saying that. Like that, you know? And, but like, you know, yeah. So my coach in college, this is something that I learned from her. She was like, I was the one that always the hammer came down on. Like, I was the scapegoat because she knew that I had one of the biggest hearts on the team, and she knew I wasn't a quitter. I didn't have to be the best to do that. But at the same time, she broke me down, and then she always knew how to build me up. And I always knew that was coming from her because she really cared. So that's something that I convey to all of my members in a different way. Every relationship I have is different. Yeah. And so, you know, I hold them to certain expectations that I know, like, you can do that at home, but you know that that's not acceptable for you to say that about yourself. You know that, you know, if you keep grabbing those weights, you know that's not acceptable, you know. So there's certain levels of accountability, but everybody has their path. But what they have to understand, and what I understood, is that for me, the small voice was God. The small whisper was God in that year that everything was taken out of the picture. But whatever the person's small voice is, they need to keep hearing it until they hear it.
The point that you made about looking in the mirror, self-introspection is, I think, probably one of the most difficult things, because we can stay busy. As a woman especially, that is one of our little tricks that we do to disassociate with what we need to deal with. So the role that you're playing in people's lives, and like the rule I have in my office, is no negative self-talk. It's just, that's the rule, because we're helping them create new patterns. That's a pattern of behavior to tear yourself down. So if I take that pattern away from you, then you're like, you have to think of something new to say, which is, I'm going to try to do this way now. So just changing the pattern of behavior, but looking in the mirror and seeing the good, the bad, and the ugly, and being okay with all of it, to me, that's what confidence is. And that's what people look at me and they think I have something else. That's all I have. It's confidence and being comfortable with the good, the bad, and the ugly, willing to apologize when I need to. And that's just what it is.
That's just what it is. And, you know, with the role that you have and with the role that I have, that's what separates. There's a level of understanding. It's an intangible thing, I think, for you and I, from a professional standpoint, because it's somebody could do your exact same job very well, have the same clientele, and, you know, but, you know, it comes to, you know, how much do you care about understanding the fact that you need to continue to grow within your level of expertise? You know, I take it very seriously. And that's something that I think differentiates me from maybe other trainers. I don't know. I can see the difference in myself. I think the people, my clients can see the difference. Josh can see the difference. My franchise partners, they can see the difference. Mm-hmm. Because I take it personal. You know, once you know that you have tools, you can't just sit on those tools. You have to cultivate them. You have to learn more effective ways to use them. You have to transform with the way that society is, because that's another thing that you have to work around, not just what's happening in a person's home, but that Instagram post could cause marital problems. You know, that what kids are exposed to, kids having access to porn websites at 10 years old is a whole different beast that you have to take into consideration when you give somebody an outline to change their life versus 10 or 15 years ago. Yeah. So we have to continue to grow as professionals and understand that. I don't put a time frame. I just require, Devin said it yesterday, and I related to it. He said, you don't talk to people, you talk to their devils. And that makes them uncomfortable, but it like makes them trust you. So we have to continue to find ways to earn that trust, because when it does come to, people don't need fluff. People can go on Instagram, they can watch a commercial and feel good. You know, people can find their own ways to give them temporary satisfaction, or that temporary good feeling. They need somebody, you know, that's why, you know, if you have a group of friends, they tell you about their problems, they know the answer, but they want you to tell them what you want them to hear. But when you tell them what they need to hear, it's like, they don't want to hear it. Yeah. You know, it's the same thing in our profession.
Which is why some people stay where they are, and why some people elevate to a different version of themselves. Not that there's anything wrong with either or better than the other. It's just a different version of. Yeah. So that's a great transition into, so you came through that year and then you started to recover and heal. You asked for help, which is an important thing. And you put yourself in a situation where you surrounded yourself with people that were also going in that direction, which is another huge positive deposit into well-being and health. Yeah. So how long were you at Burn as a member before you started thinking, hey, I want to show other people how to do this, what I've done?
2 years and 2 months as a client. That's before I got like Burn certified. It was like around 1.5 years that I started the transition to a trainer. Another long road that I took, because, you know, their requirements are higher. And again, I kept putting it off, studying for the test. That's another story. But I had no desire to be a trainer. None. You know me. You've seen me at Matthews back in the day. What do? I come in, I go to my spot. I do the same thing now when I come home. I don't talk to anybody.
That's why I like you. That's why I like you so much, because we're the exact same way like that. I'm not the social butterfly in the family. When it comes to my craft, I can talk all day long, but I'm in and I'm out. My husband talking to everyone all night long. So you're an extroverted introvert. That's what
I am.
That's what we are.
And honestly, this is how I knew that this is the path that I needed to follow, because I was inspiring clients just by those 45 minutes. Mm-hmm. Not the high fives, not the fluff, hey in your face, not the burn sister, nothing against that stuff. It's just not me.
Not who you are.
No, but people started to send me messages and, you know, I'm struggling with this. And that's what, like, when people address me first, you'll realize that I'm quite the nurturing person. That's the person I was with for 10 years knew that. Like that's who I am. I'm that engaging, that nurturing person. And that person that tells you, hey, like, yes, you can, but it's not going to happen until you tell yourself that you can. And so I started doing that, not publicly, but like with the messages. And then it just got to the point to where so many people, even, you know, back in Matthews, I would go home and visit, and they were like, we have a poll going as to how long it's going to be before you have your own burn. And I thought it was insane when they said that. But that's why I realized it was the path I needed to follow.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting
so,
how those things work, because like you said, that wasn't on the plan for you. But when you're open to a lot, and the only way to have an open personality is to have come through what you did, have small victories throughout, and your mindset is geared towards possibility. Because if it's not geared towards possibility and new and learning and growth, you don't take a next step. You stay where you were. You stay in the comfort. So it's how we work with people. It brings that out of us, and we are that nurturing person. It just looks different.
Yeah.
Because the people that don't know me versus the people that know me, it's like they're talking about two completely different people, because it's two completely different opinions and observations of a being, but we care for people in a different way. You and I are very, very similar in that way. We don't have the ability. I always say I'm not the mommy hen type, you know, and those are great. We need those in the world. That's just not who I am. And so as you began to discover that you could be okay being that, you could be okay with caring for people and leading and nurturing, but with your flavor. So that was a step in that moment, I think, of you figuring that out. And then you transition into being a trainer at Matthews. That was kind of your first step?
Yep. I trained a few camps at Matthews. Believe it or not, when I go to Matthews, I literally have walked into a gym in Chicago right off of an airplane, didn't even know anybody in there, and can run the floating floor for 2 months. But when I go back to Matthews and I'm on the mic with Josh, I'm like choking. I'm like, because I don't know why. Yeah. That's my one little corner that I'm still allowed to be fine. Yeah. That's like my safe place. It's like
your family.
Yes. Yeah. And so, that was like my coach in college. She wanted me to be the assistant coach the year after. And I was like, I don't know if I could coach on this court. I've coached on 100 other courts. I coached a men's team at my job in Charlotte, but like going back to ship is like, and coaching, I was like, I don't know. Yeah. Like there's something about that place where you go through
turf.
Yeah. But I do realize also that it comes down to the numbers, right? So you have your way of making your craft effective, and I do as well. And we just have to understand that we have our part. So everybody's not going to relate to how I train. I've had people that have decided to go to other burns. I have, that's fine. It's if what I'm saying is meant for everybody, then I'm not saying nothing. I have to, it's kind of like a dog whistle, certain people are going to hear you, certain people aren't. That's just the way that it is. But we have to keep talking. We have to keep using our voice, because, for every tiny percentage, they're going to tell 3 people. They're going to tell 3 people if you truly make an impact. Yeah. And that's what comes to the purpose. It's not about the rankings. It's not about how much money you make. It's not about your client base. It's the need and the purpose. And you don't have to have a college degree to do that. And that's why I think that anybody that is struggling with a lot of the things that we talked about today can start by serving, because if you serve, you're going to relate to the person that you need to, and you're going to find the path that you should follow. And, and that's a tool, and you're going to find power in having confidence to look in the mirror when you need to.
Mm-hmm. And so that journey for you, serving in different gyms around Charlotte area, turned into where you are now.
Yep. I started training in West Chase. I trained in I filled in at my franchise partners are both head trainers. So I filled in there for a little bit. I was in Chicago. I was in Cocoa Beach. I was in Boca. I've been everywhere. I was literally on the road for the better part of a year. out of a suitcase, Airbnbs, turnkeys. And I got so much experience, and because a lot of those places that I went into were places that suddenly lost a trainer. And a burn trainer, there's an emotional connection there. So there was some damage there. And
who better to fill those shoes of someone losing something than someone that has lost something?
Yeah. And I had no idea what I was doing most of the time. I was just keeping it real. Keeping it real and letting them know that I authentically had their best interest at heart. And if I didn't know something, I'm like, well, boop, let's figure this one out. Like I do that. Like, I think I did that yesterday. Like, I tell people, you have to tell me or else I'm instantly going to forget. Like, I'm totally transparent. Because they know that the things that I do know, that I'm not blowing smoke, because if I make a mistake, and that's another thing I had to learn as a leader, being a learning leader, you have to admit when you're wrong. You have to learn how to apologize. You have to learn to tell people that you appreciate small things that they do, even if they don't say it back. Like, there's a certain level of humility that comes with being a true leader, an effective one. And people can sniff that out, man. These days, people know what's fake and what's real.
Yeah.
Especially the older you get, So, it's all a transitional work in progress, an ongoing thing.
So coming into the present day and single.
Yeah.
I have single friends here in Charlotte, and I know it's difficult, but still open to possibilities, correct?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I just realized that I am not, like, if it's not going to work, I think it's going to be known to both of us up front. I am, now that I'm settled and no longer traveling, I have a couple of friends that, I talk about it with, but I have accepted the fact, like, after seeing everything that has transpired over the past couple of years and how there's no way I could have, like you said, written that blueprint from the beginning. I have accepted the fact that I'm going to stay the path. I'm going to, I'm not going to walk around as this, this 6'2" chick with biceps and tattoos that, is a drill sergeant. I could be that, but I'm also a lady. You know what I mean? I'm being true to myself, and, of course I'm, nobody's meant to be alone, but I know that it can't be the wrong person. I learned that already.
Yes. So. And the right person will find you when it's the right time. Timing's everything. And so for your future at Burn, open to possibilities there as well, and love that group, that family.
I do. So I do love my Crusaders here. Also, I've always kind of believed this, whatever path is meant for me, I wholeheartedly believe that it does not exist yet. And so I am open to that, just as open as I was in the beginning when I didn't have a whole lot to show for things. I'm still open to that now. So, for example, creating this connection with you, starting to continue to use my voice beyond just these four walls. Because I do feel like there's an anointing, there's an experience here that goes beyond just fitness. Yeah. So I would be doing an injustice to the people that could possibly hear what I had to say if I didn't say it. Yep. There's so many resources to say it to where I'm so open to all of that.
And that's what makes meaning out of it all. Because if we just experience it and hide our story and not share, what was it for? Yeah. And so sharing that story and helping others along the way, shorten that year to 6 months or 3 because of what you told them and the potential of what they can do in multiplication of good things and joy and grace and love. It's exponential, the people that we can help. And I think we're both called to do that. Yeah. So what do you have on the agenda for the rest of 2020? Anything?
To travel. So I have a cousin that is living his best life in Hawaii. Like, he
Oh,
sends me a Snapchat every day. He's like, just took some bananas down off the tree in the backyard and hollowed out this tree trunk. I'm going to make it a flower bed. Like, he works on the beach. Like, he sends me videos of whales jumping in the ocean. I'm just like,
wow.
and, you know, so the first thing is to go see him, because we were like brother and sister growing up. We're two of the cousins that are closest in age.
Yeah.
But traveling more. And one thing that I have experienced now that I feel like, because I kind of was hopping around, and I feel like this gym is my home. And I know it may seem weird to start with burn, but these are people with lives. And so, you know, I've made some great connections in this community. You know, not saying I don't typically make friends with clients. Like, it's just one of those things. But but I can see my reputation in this community. You never know. I'm going to start, like, if kids are ever allowed to play basketball together again, I intend to start coaching. That was the plan until COVID. But so I've, you know, you just never know. I'm open to all of it.
And that's how you will receive it, because you're open.
Yep. I've met.
You had to learn to be that way.
Yep. Exactly. Because who knew that like 2020 was going to be this way so far? Like, you just don't know. And so we'll see but traveling is definitely a thing. It's so funny because I'm always like, I don't know about traveling by myself. Like, people are crazy these days. But I'm going to move to Tampa. I don't know anybody there. I'm just going to load up my car and go. Totally normal. I'm going to travel around the U.S. and train at different burn boot camps and show up at gyms at 4 a.m. But I will not go on a vacation by myself, because that's like, I was like, what am I doing, man? I should have been traveling this whole time. I've been working my whole adult life. So that is something that I want to start doing. I've got such an awesome team here. These people are worth waiting for. You know, there's a trust there. We all are like-minded people, you know. So that's one thing in 2020, rolling into 2021. Yeah.
So to leave our listeners that are currently in that year that you spoke about, what is something you could leave them with to do, to think, to, you know, implement that could help them get to the other side?
You have to realize that there's 100% chance that you're going to get to the other side if you're alive. It's up to you. How I don't ever want people to bypass the experiences in the journey. People need to learn how to live in their journeys. I don't know how long, no one knows how long a person's journey is going to be, but you just have to remember that as long as you're alive, there's 100% chance that you're going to go to the other side. You just have to start to take the steps and realize that you were created, and it starts with you. Everything in your life starts with you. And don't try to figure out what you don't know. Just start with you. Find small ways to be able to look in the mirror, and go through it. But one thing that I always remember throughout my journey is that there is another side. And if there's not, I'm not going to know that I never made it there if I'm not here anymore, you know. But that's something that I always remembered. So that's what I would tell any of the listeners. Like, they have to understand that it's hard. It's hard. It ain't easy. You have to bury yourself in books. You have to, it's like food. If you live off of Cheetos, you're going to have the metabolism of Cheetos. If you live off of fruits and vegetables, you're going to have the metabolism of fruits and vegetables. It's the same thing. Yeah. Like you said, there's a science that comes behind the energy and the mindset, and people discredit the mind when it comes to the body, and the law of attraction and the things that are in their life, and you have to feed that.
Yeah.
So that would be my message.
I think that's a great way to end it, is feed it.
That's it.
Give it what it needs. Kim, thank you so much for joining us today. I know your story is going to help so many. Please take me to Hawaii with you.
We may have to plan a trip.
Yes.
We may have to. This is my year to not just work and go home.
Awesome. You've earned it. You really have. And I look forward to seeing your travels and your adventures to come. Thank you so much for sharing this time with us. Thank you guys. Till next time.
Thank you so much, Sandra. It's a pleasure.